Hello, and welcome back to an all-new episode here on the Desensitized channel. As always, my name is Darius Cook, back at it again today with another solo review. Today I want to talk about a series that has garnered a lot of interest as of late. It's one I've had my eye on for a while, and that is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a horror series, anime that is adapted from a famous horror manga from the late 90s. This has had a lot of attention coming its way for a while now, so a lot of anticipation from myself and the fandom at large, and it has a very mixed response. So today I'm very excited to break it all down and get right into it. So without further ado, let's roll it. Let's talk about Uzumaki. As stated before, Uzumaki is a horror anime series. It's a mini-series with only 4 episodes that is adapted from the famous horror manga of the late 90s. Junji Ito is a very famous author in Japan. He's known for creating horrific worlds. I think he would be a good comparison to R.L. Stine's here in the States. But you know, I've heard about this manga so many times. It's been the center of a lot of discourse, especially around spooky season. It's October at the time of this recording, so dropping these 4 episodes was well timed to reach into the season. And so me personally, being an anime and manga fan, this is something I've had my eye on for a long time. I knew that it was coming down the pipeline, and I was eagerly awaiting it like a lot of other people were. Unfortunately, I am here to discuss how underwhelming I felt like this product was once it was delivered. I think a lot of people that have been consuming this online all have a similar opinion that the animation was really underwhelming, and a lot of the ways that they chose to go about telling this story felt cheap and as if it was cutting corners. So you might be asking at this point, what is Uzumaki all about? Well, Uzumaki in Japanese actually means spiral. And this story follows a character named Kirie, she's from a small town in Japan, and all of a sudden her town starts to be plagued with a spiral curse. So we're following this character kind of through her point of view, with her friend Shuichi, who kind of helps her figure out all the kind of mysteries that are going on as the author finds different ways of using the concept of a spiral, just a spiral that goes in on itself, and how it can inflict damage and pain in a significant amount of ways. One thing that the series does really have going for it is using the imagery of a spiral and finding a lot of ways to make that feel terrifying. There is imagery used in this story that does still actually very much so stick with me, even though I was underwhelmed by the production overall. For example, seeing people turn into slugs and snails and kind of turn inward on themselves is a very horrific imagery. Now, not every imagery that they use in this series lands. We see things as weird as people just spinning themselves into a tornado that they seemingly can control by the end of the series. But we also see things as simple as people just simply turning in on themselves and becoming a physical spiral in that way. We also see, weird things like females' hairs turning in on themselves and becoming sentient hair. So the spiral curse manifests itself in a lot of different unique ways. Again, some of them stick to the horror iconography and make you feel really upset and skin crawly, but a few of them, especially by the time we get to the end of these 4 episodes, feels like the author is kind of spinning his own wheels and just trying to figure out a way to land the ship, and that the spiral concept doesn't necessarily have enough gas to keep, all of these situations going. I do think that the strongest episode in this 4-episode run is the first episode. Watching it, I was completely sold on this horror concept. It starts very slowly with characters just seeing spirals in the skies. They'll see spirals in the shape of the clouds. They'll see spirals within their fingertips. It's small, but you see it in a very eerie way start to slowly creep up into the minds of the citizens of this town. So you see the curse slowly building. Of course, that does ramp up to the point where by the end, the curse has pretty much destroyed and consumed everyone within the town, and that seems to be its overall goal. But in those early episodes, specifically episode 1, they don't take the spiral concept too far yet, and it still feels grounded enough and mysterious enough to keep you engaged as a viewer. Episode 1 also has the best animation of the 4 episodes. This series is done in black and white, which feels like it really aids to the tone of this scary world that they're building out. However, as the episodes go on, it feels like the animation and the budget really decreases. There are some scenes where we see characters running or just talking. The staging of the scenes feels like something that would have been released like 15 to 20 years ago in terms of how scaled back the animation looks. The author did come out with a public apology, claiming that, the team did the best that they could with what they had, but that they were essentially screwed over in terms of this production, in terms of the schedule, budget, whatever have you. The creators behind this were aware that they were putting out a product that probably wasn't going to satisfy the viewers. And that's really disappointing, especially for something that, has had so much hype around it. You think that it would have gotten a proper budget to do this story that is so popular justice. But unfortunately, that's not what we got here. We got a very scaled back version. That being said, based on the promise of what episode 1 had, the quality that we saw in episode 1, if it was able to maintain that tone, that writing, the animation, and overall style of how episode 1 was performed, if that was carried on throughout, I think that we'd be talking about the series in a very different way. Unfortunately, it felt like a law of diminishing returns. Every time I put on a new episode, I just got more and more disappointed and lost more faith in this property. Adult Swim was the company behind the series, and to be honest, I find myself being disappointed with Adult Swim anime that are coming out. Ninja Kamui was a recent Adult Swim anime. There was also a Rick and Morty anime that came out recently, both of which I would consider borderline unwatchable. Me and Dan Cass have a video breaking down the season of Ninja Kamui that was released on Adult Swim, and especially by the time you get to the end of it, I would never recommend it to anyone. The Rick and Morty anime I consider pretty much unwatchable. It's hard to even consider that an anime. And now with this inclusion to the Adult Swim lineup as of late, I'm really losing faith in Adult Swim as a property that can actually release good anime. There are even more anime to come with Adult Swim over the next year or two. They have a lot of adaptations announced, and so we'll see if they can kind of pick it up from here. But as a production, I don't think Adult Swim has a handle on how to make good anime at this point. One thing I will say is that this anime was released simultaneously with a sub and a dub, and I actually really appreciate the dubbing of the series. At first, I was kind of committed to watching it in sub, but as the episodes went on and I realized that the quality wasn't quite there, I just ended up turning on the dub and realized that the dubbing was actually pretty solid. That was one thing that I wasn't disappointed with. This had a very solid dub, and that falls in line with the growing trend within anime of having simultaneous dub releases along with sub, and with that, an increased quality of dubbed content. For years, if you watched a dubbed anime, you're probably watching a lesser version of that in terms of the vocal production. But nowadays, it seems like the quality of dub is finally catching up to sub. And so that, if dub happens to be the more convenient avenue for you to consume the media, if it has a great dub, I'm all here for that. So that's one thing this show did not disappoint on. As I mentioned before, the series follows Kirie and Shuichi as they navigate their town and seeing their loved ones, friends, and families all getting caught up in the spiral curse and it becoming a fatal end to most of the people in this town. By the time we get to the last episode, it literally whittles down to the point where it's pretty much just Kirie and Shuichi left of this town. And, at this point, it at least feels like we're getting to the center of a mystery behind everything that's going on here. And me continuing to watch the series was built on me having faith that this material was going to provide an answer at the end of the road to all of this, that this would make sense, or there would be something they could do to lift the curse or satisfy the curse in some way. But I don't feel like the conclusion really gave us anything like that. The conclusion essentially sees our characters making it to the center of the spiral, realizing that it's a living, breathing thing that just wants to consume, I suppose. And once they come to that realization, they kind of just give up. We've seen them persevering for weeks within their own timeline. And of course, I would be tired as well. But as a viewer, it felt very unsatisfying to see them push and get finally to this point and then just decide, you know what, I'm tired of fighting it. Let's just become part of the spiral. And that's what they do. Our main characters just become a part of it, and the series is close to a bit of narration from the main character, Kirie, saying, and that's how our town was completely consumed by the spiral curse. That's it. We don't understand why the curse happened. We don't understand why it happened now. what it wanted or what are the ramifications moving forward within the city in Japan. I'm left with a lot more questions and answers, and as a viewer, I'm not left with a satisfying hook. You know, we've seen Kyrie duck and dodge the curse in so many ways throughout the series that her getting to the end of it, learning nothing new and simply giving up really didn't do anything for me as a viewer. I feel completely unsatisfied. Something else that was a little odd in terms of just the pacing of the series, you know, episodes 1, 2, and 3, I think do a good job of consistently pacing out the progress of this curse in terms of how it's affecting everyone. You know, at first it's kind of just a rumor, it's something that's happening in the background. By the time we get into episode 2, there's actual phenomenon happening. Episode 3, it's pretty widespread and everyone's kind of grappling with it. But then you jump to episode 4 and it's like we're jumping 2 weeks within the timeline. All of a sudden it's super post-apocalyptic. There's a few people left alive within this town and everything's kind of taken on a new form. The most annoying thing to me is the introduction of this butterfly or dragonfly gang in episode 4. They're people that are taking advantage of this post-apocalyptic scenario, but we just see that they have the ability to just shoot themselves into a tornado and wreak havoc on everyone around them. The series puts a little bit of effort into trying to explain the logic of how this is happening, but by the time we're getting to people just turning into tornadoes and controlling them, I'm feeling like the author has run out of creative steam for Spiral as a concept becoming something terrifying. Maybe this comes off a little bit better in the manga in terms of how it's written and the logic. I feel like maybe the production ran out of time. It's hard to believe with only 4 episodes, but it feels like, you know, there should have been another episode in between here. The pacing of the series maybe would have been more well suited for a 5-episode structure. I don't think this needed to be a 12-episode season of anime by any means. But by the time we get to episode 4, if you're able to look past all the jarring animation and just overall production flaws, by the time you get to episode 4, the writing really gets thrown out the window and they just want you to catch up. You know, I think that there's a way to do it skillfully, and you know, you can jump through time, you can make assumptions for the viewer, but you have to do it while still effectively communicating stuff to the viewer, and this did not do that in any way, shape, or form. All that being said, for all the critiques that I do have for this series, you know, this is just from a production and an artistic point of view. If I were to really catalog my experience watching it, I will say I did have a lot of fun. Because it was so bad, it ended up being something that I could kind of, you know, by the end of episode 2, I'm accepting how poorly made this is in terms of the animation and everything like that, that you kind of accept it and then you can watch it as a fun watch. I do think that, you know, when we look into the future, you know, the future of this series, I think will be a fun watch during spooky season. It was October while I was watching this season, and so it was a fun way. You know, even though it was really bad, it still managed to make my skin crawl and deliver on some very eerie and creepy concepts and moments throughout. And so if you're looking for something to get high and hanging out with your friends, or you just got out from a night of drinking and you're sitting on the couch before you go to bed, I think this is a fun thing to turn on, especially during spooky season. It's not great, but it's a fun thing to watch and maybe make fun of with your friends. And for what it's worth, it will make you feel creeped out and afraid at various times. It just doesn't come together necessarily as a whole piece of fiction. But yeah, I think that's going to bring this video to a close. I know that was more of a quick one, but yeah, in my opinion, this was an underwhelming release of a great concept, but I still had fun watching it crash and burn, and I'm sure that people will continue to enjoy watching the series for all it has to offer in the future. What did you think about Spiral? Are you definitely afraid of spirals? I will say, having seen this now, I am noticing spirals more around me in my everyday life, and so maybe I've been infected by the spiral curse now. Maybe that's how this show gets you. It's a long burn. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more. We've got a lot of great anime content coming out. But for now, that's been another great video. Peace out, and remember that I love you.